Let me start today's session titled The State of Open Science Globally. Open science becomes the global code of conduct by which diverse sectors around the world acknowledge and commit to follow. So various movements and practices are now happening around the world, and I hope this session is actually facilitating our understanding and practice around the world related to open science. I'm Eunjung Shin, chair of this session, and I'm working at a Science and Technology Policy Institute here in Korea, and have engaged in multiple working group activities related to open science recommendation and research data to date. It's an honor to be with distinguished speakers and guests today around the world, and I hope our session can actually further accelerate our networking centered on open science. We have four distinguished speakers today, Ms. Bianca Armaro, Dr. Choi Gang-nam, Ms. Heather Joseph, and I'm sorry, Dr. Tsuamo and Dr. Nosada. These four speakers will actually share their stories that are being developed in diverse regions around the world. So I would like to ask each speaker to present their ideas and experience within 15 minutes. And after having all four presentations in a row, we'll have panel discussion in the end. Since we have half an hour, an hour and a half, so I expect that we'll have at least 20 minutes in the end for our panel discussion. Today's session is organized by three distinguished international organizations with participants from various regions. So translation services, interpretation services will be provided. If you can choose English in a Zoom meeting, then you will hear English. And then if you prefer Korean, then you can choose Korean version. And for the participants who actually physically present in this meeting room, you can also use your translator for your convenience. So from now on, we'll begin with presentations of our distinguished speakers. Let me first invite our speaker, Dr. Tsuamo. He's a director in the African Open Science Platform, and he will talk about current development in African cyber infrastructure to support open science. Please welcome him in a round of applause.
Thank you very much for the warm introductions. I'm very, very excited to be here. I would have loved to be there in Korea in person, but unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond my control, I couldn't be. But this is a very exciting opportunity for us in the African continent, and indeed today me representing the African Open Science Platform, to come and engage in this very, very important conference around data. I think the International Data Week conference, wherever it goes, it brings together diverse stakeholders. It's very, very opportune that we convene to discuss issues like open science, looking at the fact that going forward, this is one area really that promises a lot in terms of getting us to collaborate and engage globally. Today, I'm going to be presenting on the efforts in the African continent around the vision for an African open science platform. And indeed, such a platform has got many facets. The areas of policy are very, very important. There's a very, very big gap in terms of policy frameworks that supports open science. And indeed, this is very instrumental regarding operationalization of the UNESCO Open Science Recommendations. I think the issue of infrastructure is very, very critical, especially for developing countries, in that we do have very competent scientists who are otherwise ready to do great work, but often they are frustrated by lack of infrastructure. And more often than not, they migrate to other parts of the world where environments are conducive. I think the issue of data, as you can see, there is also critical. And indeed, International Data Week, in terms of its tradition, has really been looking at this area. The issue of access, equitable access of scientific literature, very important. And of course, the issue of skills, to make sure that our scientists are skilled to be able to do science in the 21st century, especially where there is data-intensive requirements. I think also the issue of culture and incentives to do work in open science is very critical. And doesn't escape us that collaborations and partnership will be critical to any of these developments. I'm spending time on that slide because I think it really captures what AOSP will be trying to do in the coming future as we're getting started. I've also shared some links immediately there that shows some engagement in terms of publicity we've had already to showcase that AOSP is about to start. And the train will be moving, but it will be moving with all the stakeholders on board, which is why we are very keen to engage today at IDW to highlight what AOSP is. And then in terms of IDW, I was excited to hear that IDW is coming to Korea. It was in Africa in 2018. And indeed, we had very, very vibrant conversations then, culminating in the Gaborone statement in terms of the positions that the governments think of what data can pay. Very, very good attendance. You'll notice that this is before COVID. So it was really packed. So indeed, it's unfortunate that I cannot be there in Korea to experience that atmosphere of IDW. But maybe in terms of setting up a context, in terms of what AOSP will look like, look at the scale of Africa. Scale of Africa is such that we can actually fit in a lot of regions in there. So the scale of the problem is also comparable. Indeed, also the scale of opportunities that open science also provides. Africa does provide a blueprint for where Africa wants to be, joining the nations of the world in prosperity and in collaboration in other areas. The Agenda 2063 really captures this essence, looking at economic pillars, looking at global challenges that Africa can also help solve, but also looking at the rapid change in the African and global landscape. The challenges themselves that Africa also experiences and acknowledges are multifaceted, and they are interlinked. They transcend boundaries. Not only one country can solve them. And indeed, it requires collaboration. So I wanted to flash that to show that at an African level, there is an instrument that gets to get us to work together in terms of looking at the challenges we have. And indeed, there's accompanying documents like the STISA, the Science and Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa, that shows how science can really be used to solve some of these problems. If we were to look also at areas of collaboration regarding obviously research, you'll notice that Africa still has a lot of work to do in terms of internal collaborations within the continent, obviously to further African agenda through research. Compare that maybe with Europe and US, you'll see that the graphs are fairly dense in the north and fairly sparse in Africa. And indeed, this needs to be rectified. One approach is to look at maybe developing these cyber infrastructures. I wanted to show this because I think this is critical for open science to be operationalized effectively. Environments must be created for that to happen. And the cyber infrastructure ecosystem really captures that essence. This is an ecosystem showing, obviously, the computational resources, the networking, the data, linking organizations, and linking expertise, sharing scientific instruments. And more often than not, all these things will lead to collaboration. A lot of work has been done in this area. And I wanted to flash that to contextualize the presentation that I'm going to do today. And indeed, if you look globally, and indeed this will be the conversation happening in IDW today, there is a trend in developing open science clouds. Indeed, GOSC is being mouthed, is being thought about, is being implemented, it's been discussed, where we're looking to collaborate, especially on areas like sustainable development goals, infectious diseases, global disaster recovery. And if you look at areas like Europe, they've done very, very well in terms of some of these platforms. And indeed, COVID has shown that these platforms can be very, very effective in helping work together. Open science is well articulated in terms of what it is. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but the emphasis should really be on engagement with society and the economy in terms of research activities. Scientists must think about how their science and their outputs in terms of research blend with society. There must be this core design, emphasis on transdisciplinary research, and the emphasis on the interfaces between research, development, and innovation. Of course, all the other facets of open science are well articulated, I'm sure, in this conference, including fair data, and this culture for opening things up. And of course, the motivations of why open science are also well understood. I'm not going to belabor the point, but one can emphasize that open data has got great potential for fostering and accelerating innovation and scientific discovery by really making the use of data within and outside the academic ecosystem. I think this is important to recognize that really at the end of the day, research data is a public good because it emanates from publicly funded research. The benefits to stakeholders can also be enunciated. Of course, an exercise can be done, but you can see there the governments, research institutions, and researchers can see great value in open science. We are here today in this session looking at the UNESCO Open Science Recommendations. This is indeed a very, very important development. For Africa as well, we see this as a critical recommendation that we need to look at. Recently, I was in Kigali at the Africa Regional Science and Technology Innovation Forum and the Regional Forum for Sustainable Development. And indeed, coming out of those forums, there was very strong messages that recognizes the importance of operationalizing open science. And indeed, it goes without saying that we need platforms like the African Open Science Platform that I will talk about today to really take hold, to be able to operationalize these recommendations. The opportunities and potential for open science in Africa are profound and varied. I've just shown some examples. I'm showing some examples there. Africa is a mineral-rich economy. There's potential in terms of open data, in terms of finding the next mineral deposits. There's great value in Earth observation, potential in ecotourism. Africa is a very young continent. There's very, very good potential in making sure that we train our young scientists in the continent in the best practices of open science. And indeed, there's also very good potential in cutting-edge science in the continent. In terms of the imperatives when it comes to Africa for open science, I think there are the same imperatives for all the other continents. We must, in the continent, develop a research commons that can get us to work together to solve continental challenges, and then by extension, be able to solve global challenges. And that requires, obviously, some of the elements I've talked about, including infrastructures. We must also think about working together in projects that can become programs with a Pan-African footprint. I think this is very, very critical in terms of enhancing our collaborations. The second point that I think is also very critical, it's very, very imperative that we promote these best practices we're talking about, and also think about the impact of open science in society. It goes without saying that we need these policy instruments that are developed by countries and institutions that also align with national agendas so that they are effective. The issue of open science, insofar as citizen science is concerned, is critical. The issue of open innovation, as far as open science is concerned, is critical. And the issue of data promises, obviously, a great value. particular, if you look at the issue of open government and bringing government closer to the people through digital transformation strategies and opening up government data sets and looking at data as the route to inclusion and equity is also very, very critical. I think when it comes to literature, open access also promises very, very good potential. We do need to think about new models for publishing. Generally democratizing science. We know that it's very, very expensive to access scientific literature. This is critical for the continent. In fact, the continent must also think about how we can shape the discussion about open access and how we can come to the fore with the debate. I think also the issue of making sure that Africans can publish widely. You can see there on the bottom right that there are some journals that are helping Africans come to the party in terms of supporting Africans in publishing. I wanted to make sure that we provide that background, if only to showcase that open science is critical to the continent. There has been a very good landscape study that has been done to showcase and highlight capacities and activities in the continent. And a report has been published and is publicly available, showcasing the baseline work that was done to showcase what Africa has been doing and is doing to date. Out of that landscape study, a strategy was developed, a strategy for the African Open Science Platform that has got 5 prongs. The first prong being the development of these federated computational facilities and infrastructure, very critical in terms of the hard infrastructure. And then in terms of the soft infrastructure is the need really for the development of policy frameworks and of course, promoting best practices in research data management. I think the issue of skills we mentioned is very critical. ASP will look to develop a Pan-African data science and AI institute, really spanning and embedded in our African institutions. I think this is critical because it will require partnerships with capacity building partners, partnership with industry. And I'm really here to emphasize these pillars because we'll be seeking partnership to make sure that we move forward swiftly in these areas. On the third pillar is the issue of these application programs that will see us as a continent framing and working together on projects that will have a Pan-African footprint. Towards the end of my presentation, I'll share some examples of how we're trying to do that. I think the last 2 are also very critical. We need to develop this network of education and skills to make sure that within the continent, we do have capacity to train, and we can share trainings, we can share curricula that has been developed for education, et cetera, et cetera. And the last one is critical. We must have networks to make sure that we can come together and formulate projects and programs together. There's also very good opportunity to look at, so now that you saw that Africa is a very large continent, there's regions that form Africa. In terms of the operational model of the ASP, you'll notice that there will be a coordinating hub based in South Africa, hosted by the NRF under the auspices of the Department of Science and Technology for Africa, making sure that the coordinating body can talk to the development of regional ASP nodes. Already you can see that there is some work that is happening at the regions that is related and aligned to ASP. I'll give you an example there in Southern Africa, where there was a very, very good work for the past 10 years in terms of the Southern African Development Community's cyber infrastructure framework. That showed the development of an ecosystem, at least at university level, of computational infrastructures that is currently supporting a lot of research. I make this as an example because I think these are little efforts that would be required in terms of partnerships with those partners around the world to equip and facilitate African institutions to be able to be ready to progress in terms of scientific activities. There's also very good work done in West Africa in terms of ECOWAS area. There's very good work done with the libraries. There's a project called LibSense, spearheaded by the West African NREN, WACREN, engaging and participating, collaborating with international parties. It's really important to mention this because it really talks to a number of pillars. They're looking to facilitate in infrastructure. They're looking to help with policy and governance. The project is also doing a lot of very, very good work in terms of capacity building. And I think these are very, very good alignments with ASP that will be required to be replicated around the different nodes in the continent. I think I have to emphasize that at a country level as well, there's need for national platforms and digital transformation initiatives. And indeed, at a continental level, there is the Africa Digital Transformation Strategy. I'm giving an example there of Botswana in terms of their current work in digital transformation. Through this particular initiative, there is a concerted effort to develop a capacity towards a knowledge-based economy. And within that particular vision, there is need for development of cyber infrastructure, including the development of the requisite connectivity. And indeed, Botswana was one of the few countries in the sub-Saharan Africa that didn't have an NREN, a National Education Research Network. But it's through this particular initiative and partnership with the Ubuntu Net Alliance, a network of networks in East Africa and Southern Africa, together with Africa Connect 3 project, a European project, that we saw Botswana developing a national education research network. I'm emphasizing this because these are the makings of the cyber infrastructure that I talked about. So in terms of the evolution of AOSP, we are now at the implementation phase. And I'm here today to implore and to engage stakeholders to come to the party in terms of partnership with us going forward with the platform. And in terms of the implementation of the strategy, there are a number of pillars that I want to very, very quickly share with you. AOSP is looking to augment the gap analysis study that we've done in 2018 to make sure that now we have a fuller understanding of what's happening in the continent. We now have a portal that I will invite you to look at in terms of our visibility. AOSP is a contributor to UNESCO recommendations to provide a Pan-African perspective to the debate. And we are here today to also engage, to share with you what we are trying to do. We've also engaged with the International Science Council in terms of articulating what AOSP will be doing in terms of the publicity. I'll implore you to look at the blog resulting from our discussions there. I think one of the key areas as well will be the development of the monitoring and evaluation framework for open science and indeed for African open science platform. I'm mentioning this because for us to measure impact of open science, we must develop requisite indicators. And indeed, this is something that AOSP is doing and engaging the African STI Observatory in developing these indicators. We are very, very in the advanced process of setting up or at least developing a conceptual model for how the regional nodes across the different regions of Africa can look like. And we'll be shortly issuing a call for setting up some of these nodes. We are also vigorously, as you can imagine, engaging to build a very strong representative membership base. We need membership for AOSP emanating from organizations, funding organizations, research performing organizations, NGOs, industry, to make sure that we have a very strong membership base from which we can have very robust governance structures. Resource mobilization will be critical. We are developing a very strong value proposition. We are engaging stakeholders, and we need to be aligning initiatives that are providing funding. And indeed, today, we are hoping to make overtures in that area. In terms of policy, which I think is critical, AOSP is working closely with countries that are developing open science policies. And going forward, we'll be formulating mechanisms for helping provide policy frameworks to make sure that these things are not done from scratch. Regarding open access, we are aligning with ISC on the relevant initiatives. Regarding open data, we are working on formulating a data science institute. We're looking for partnership with industry and all the other players to make sure that this data science institute is reflective and effective. We are aligning with those that are doing capacity building and have developed mature curricula in terms of making sure that in the continent, we have access to these materials. In terms of projects, which I think is very, very critical, there are some areas that already, as a continent, we can look to engage on. If you look at the areas of weather and climate, there's very good potential for the continent to work together on. You'll see there that there are some gaps in terms of data that is coming from observations within the continent. The continent is very sparse in terms of observations. So there is need for developing the underlying infrastructure and the necessary human capital to do this. I can cite a number of projects that already have been going on in the continent and can be enhanced or extended to become programs in the continent. And we can use this project to promote best practices of open science. And indeed, some of these projects have already produced some interesting publications. If you look at the area of genomics, there's a very exciting project funded by the NIH through the Data Science Initiative of Africa around genomics and genomics communities. This promises to be a very, very interesting project that can help obviously promote open science within that community. In chemistry, there's some very good projects in terms of renewable energy and computational chemistry, consortia of countries and universities, promoting obviously a collaboration between countries. These projects can be extended with further funding to have the necessary Pan-African footprint and solve problems like energy sufficiency. Space sciences promises to be an excellent area. Indeed, Africa has got an open space science policy that is mature. And underneath this particular space science policy, one can envisage a number of very exciting projects in conservation, in ecology, in space weather, and others that we can all work together on. And indeed, with appropriate partnerships and funding, this can provide a very, very good use cases. AOSP is working closely with the regional bodies like SADC in terms of development of regional space policy strategies, common policy that allow us to formulate and work on projects together. And indeed, this is something that needs to be replicated across the regions. So really, in summary, Madam Chair, thanks for giving me enough time to go through the presentation. We wanted today to share with you what the African continent is doing regarding avenues for operationalizing open science recommendations through the ambit of the AOSP. And indeed, this promises to be a very, very good vehicle that will really allow us to kill many birds with the same stone. We look at AOSP as a very, very good conduit for getting the continent to work together, but also preparing us as a continent to solve global problems. You'll see there that we are looking to take a pragmatic approach. There's no shortage of good ideas that have never been implemented. So we're looking to take a deliberative, pragmatic approach, engaging stakeholders like I see today at IDW, so that we can have a joint action. Already there is very, very good indications in the continent, like I specified, of very good projects that can be turned into programs. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and then invite colleagues in case of any inquiries about AOSP. We have the portal that I've shared. We also got an email there of our contact person for inquiries. And we'll be very looking forward to hearing from you about how you can engage and how AOSP can also collaborate with other efforts elsewhere. And we remain very, very committed on this for the long term and looking forward to hearing more from colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Tiamo. It was a very detailed story of what's done on open science in Africa. And without further ado, let me invite our second speaker, Ms. Bianca Amaro.
Thank you a lot. First of all, I'd like to thank for the invitation. And I'm very glad to be here and try to explain, to show the situation of Latin America and specifically the situation of Brazil, the country that I've come. And so I'll start my presentation. I'm here to speak about the network La Referencia, the Latin American network for open science repositories, and the action that we are working on in the Brazilian Institute of Information on Science and Technology. Well, first of all, what is La Referencia? La Referencia is the network for open access repository for science. And our mission is to give visibility to the public funded science production in Latin America through the cooperation and articulation of a federated network of institutions and data repositories based on regional agreements. And it's very important, these regional agreements for the national and to open access strategies. It's duplicated. We are now 12 countries from Latin America, and we have the participation also from Spain, that we have a historical collaboration in science and technology. And so, and because we have the same language, it's very interesting, the participation of Spain in our network. But it's very important to say that we are a Latin American network, and nowadays we have the most important countries from Latin America, and we are working all the time. And I'm the honor to be president nowadays from La Reverencia, and we are trying to that all the countries from the region to participate of our network. Well, we work in three main pillars. We have the pillar of agreements, where we try to produce public goods, interoperability of our countries, alliance and projects together. We work also with guidelines. We produce guidelines, and we work with the international guidelines too. And we have a very important production in terms of technology. We have now a very I would say, very important harvester that include, we are transferring this harvesting to other regions. And it's very pleasant to see that African Walking is our partner now with this harvester. Well, in terms of policies in Latin America, we have now 62 OA institutional mandates. Most of them are institutional mandates and not a national mandates. In terms of national legislation, we have the legislation from Peru, Mexico, Argentina, Chile is under construction, and the same thing happens to Brazil. As you can imagine, we have a very profound asymmetry inside each country and amongst Latin America countries, with some international collaboration and funding. It's very, very important to highlight that Latin America does not have common funds for R&D. We have to work with our budgets, national budgets, and you can imagine that it's not a very huge budget. But working together, we are achieving a very important things around the open science. In general terms, data repository are still incipient on the region, but we are working hardly to change this situation. Our infrastructure software is based in, is implemented in a distributed infrastructure based on the national nodes running the same softwares. We work with the national nodes. The country works in terms of their own production and reunit it in the national words, and we harvest these national words. And we have the regional infrastructure that interoperates with other regional such open air. I mean, our production is now present in open air initiative. We have in R3 data 76 Latin America repositories registered. And I would like to say that La Referência Harvesters is adapted to collect any metadata schema. So metadata from data repository can be harvested without extra coding. It's very important to see. At national level, we in Brazil, we are collecting Dataverse instance, and Argentina is collecting across different repositories. Costa Rica is ready to expose their data repository. At the regional level, La Referência is the central node that is working now on collecting data sets from national nodes. It's very important to say that a lot of our data, scientific data, are deposited in international infrastructure, but it's not inside our national repositories. We are trying to recover that information to have our own collection, national collection from the scientific data. We are working in our improvements of La Referência software in terms of collaborative work. And we are trying to connect our CV systems with the CRIS systems. CRIS systems is the current research information systems, and it will be very important to organize all the information that we have inside our countries, and after that to create a regional ecosystem from this scientific information. Well, we have a very huge international alignment. Now, La Referência's countries are COAR member, the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. And we've been part of Open Air 2020 and Open Air Advanced projects, like distributed usage statistic, Open Air brokers, guidelines 3 and 4, and as a network, we are part of RDA, Research Data Alliance, and we have a MIU with Zenodo, with CERN, and with Portugal in terms of construction of our improvements in our harvester. But we have a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. For example, we have to change the ways in which researchers are evaluated. We think that it's a very important thing to do, not only in Latin America, but all around the world. As you can imagine, Latin America always followed the rules from the North countries. And if the North countries don't change the way that they evaluate, it will be very complicated and it will give us a lot of work to change. But we know that it's very, very important because it's a barrier to open science in all the ways. We have to convince national funding agencies to link funding with the adoption of condition of open access and open access practice. We have to create a national legal framework in all of our countries. We don't have national, in terms of open science, and not only in open access, we have to change the culture of research managers, of institutions, and research in favor of open science. But this point, it's very related with the evaluation, the assessment of the researchers. We have to try to obtain national, regional, and international funding to support open science activities in the region. We had to we had to work to build a common infrastructure for large data storage and interoperability, since Latin America does not have a common funding source, as I said before. We have to create a stronger national infrastructures inside our countries with proper technical human resource. We have, I would say that we have some problem to find and to train the human resources in our countries. We have to increase our metadata quality and interoperability. We have created a lot of repositories, but we have to work with the quality of this metadata. We have a symmetry that requires setting priorities and working at regional and international level. We have to engage our community in RDA working groups to be a voice in this kind of initiative. We have to recover, as I said before, Latin American research data deposited in national and foreign infrastructures. Our strength is the acknowledgement and respect of the difference as a foundation of our collaboration. These are the parts of I'd like to show you about Latin America as a region. And I would like to present you some activities, the situation from Brazil. Well, in Brazil, we have the Brazilian portal of scientific data and publication that is known as Oasis BR. In Oasis BR, we harvest the journals, the institutional repositories, the data sets, and the thesis and the libraries of theses and dissertations. Now we have more than 3 million of documents that are related from our research outputs, Brazilian outputs, okay? And we are harvest from to La Referencia and to Open Air too. We are always working in the implementation of Open Air guidelines with fair data from metadata. We are always trying to produce material to support all our activities. And we are trying to follow the international guidelines and translate to the Portuguese to our public, to our repositories, to our management repositories. And it's very important to see that we are working in the open government partnership. And in these years, we have the compromise to establish a proposal for a new assessment mechanism for the advancement of open science. And it's very interesting because we have the participation of very different organization that represents the scientific people that are working we are trying to change the situation of the assessment. In terms of data repositories, we have a lot of initiatives, very important initiatives under construction. But we have now some results that are ready to show to all the world. And I'd like to say that's very important that we have in Brazil our RDA instance for all our activities. Another important project that we have in Brazil and that were planned to improve the creation, the implementation of data repositories was a call that have been done for the National Research RNP, National Research, I forgot the P, sorry, Leandro. RNP, a very important network in Brazil, from my institution, the Brazilian Institute of Information Science and Technology, and one of the most important funding agents in Brazil, that is the CNPq. We are constructing our Brazilian CRI system, and we are working hardly to, before the implementation of our model, to offer to other countries from Latin America and other countries our model of research of CRI system. And for that, we are extending our system. We are taking as a base the main systems, not only from the Latin America, but also with the other international initiatives. As a conclusion, work have been done around building a network of research data repositories. We are trying to expand this network, and we are trying to extend the relationships of the Brazilian Literacy Repositories Network and the projects of data repositories. We are working hard to achieve a new assessment mechanisms where data repositories have a key role in all of this. Brazil is very complex because, as you know, we have the size of a continent, but it's complex, but it's still very interesting. Well, that's all that I'd like to present, and to say thank you all.
Thanks again. It was a very thorough presentation. Let me directly invite our third speaker, Dr. Kwangnam Choi. He's a General Director in KISTI, Korean Institute of Science and Technology Information. Please welcome in a loud applause.
Hello. My name is Choi Kwangnam from KISTI, Korean Institute of Science and Technology Information. KISTI is one of the co-organizers of IDW 2022, and I am honored to be here as part of this event. Our chair gave a lot of time to the two previous presenters, and if I take that much time, I think we will go over time, so I will keep my presentation short. This is the order of my presentation. And as we discuss for the background, we discuss open science very frequently, and it's expanding rapidly, and we are doing lots of research on it. But as its background, it is centered on data as the scientific paradigm rose. And with the global pandemic's impact, there has been such a huge migration from offline to online, a digital move, and the move itself has been accelerated. And with this background, we are discussing why we need open science, and this is being visualized as we speak. We put a lot of emphasis on the importance of open science. That is because the value of data has been going up, and it has the timing of the rise of change in data and the paradigm has met, and that is why the importance has been rising further. UNESCO has talked about making it more democratic and transparent, and so there has been such data declaration by UNESCO. And among OECD member countries, open science is actively spreading, as you can see here. In Korea in 2015, we had a ministry meeting in Daejeon, not the capital Seoul, and so we are holding these kind of open science OECD meetings in Korea. As UNESCO mentioned, we divide open science into open access, open data, and open collaboration. And these different parts I will discuss in my presentation. This open science is divided into these three categories. So many researchers and many different agencies and institutions continue to say that the collaboration is becoming easier and more, it's expanding, and with that we are all experiencing the effect of it. First, let me talk about what is happening in Korea. We can first look at open access, KISTI, and the R&D Fund Agency, National Research Foundation of Korea, and National Library of Korea, and Education and Research Information Services. These four agencies are leading open access. KISTI has developed an open access platform and provided to the academia, and people can go there to view these data. And in case of the National Research Foundation, they are looking at OA journals. They are leading in the way of making these policies. And for open data, in 2017, our Ministry of Science, Technology, and ICT were discussing how we are going to effectively manage data and established a strategy. And KISTI has developed something called Data On and is providing that service. And regarding open collaboration, to explain what we do at KISTI, there is a platform called Edison and GSDC, where we give a platform to connect to global data. To look at what we are doing at KISTI for open access, in a policy perspective, we have created legislation with the ministry so that all the journals and articles written can be submitted, but this has not become mandatory yet, institutionalized. So I will tell you more about it later. And regarding this part, we are talking with publishers who are converting to OA, and as they proceed with open access, I heard that many countries such as Wiley has been working on going open access so that more publication can be available. Also, for different academic societies, we developed an access on platform so that the articles can be submitted and it can be published as an OA journal. So we developed these kind of services for their convenience. And right now at this platform, Access On, Goldway, Greenway papers are all available. There are 34 million data available right now.
And the data. We also have the open data platform called Data On, and we are providing the service. And just like the previous speakers, Australia's ARC and like other data platforms are out there, and our Data On is equivalent to such data platforms. So we provide this metadata service, and then also we have the open collaboration tool. One is NTIS, which means that there are national R&D projects, and NTIS collects all the information on national R&D projects and provide the service. So like starting from projects, tasks, and manpower and achievements, all different different aspects of national R&D projects are being provided on NTIS. And another platform is Science On, and Science On actually uses access on and data on data, but also there is a lot of infrastructure that KISTI has, supercomputer and high-speed connection network, and so these different services are all combined on Science On. So when you access Science On, you'll be able to access all the data you need. So it's a one-stop service. And next one, Edison. Edison is a platform used by universities. So universities can carry out convergent study. So AI analysis can be done by using KISTI's infrastructure, and the simulation can be run on this platform. And also, aside from Edison, there is the video conferencing platform and supercomputing platform. This supercomputing was used to conduct joint researches on COVID-19. So to find candidate drugs, the search pipeline was created by using supercomputing. And also molecular dynamic simulation was used to validate candidate drugs. And we have also collaborated with overseas agencies such as Bill and Melinda Foundation to prevent the spread of infectious disease. And here, like the mobile service agencies or telecommunication agencies have their own like network, and based on using the mobile data of those telecommunication companies, we developed the prediction model for infectious disease. And also the White House launched the COVID-19 HPC consortium, and we have also participated in that consortium. And so we have been doing a lot of collaboration and provided support on AI and big data. So like we have invested 26.9 billion won to support or create 5 types of giga data amounting to 4.25 million records. So that researchers can conduct researches based on abundant amount of data. And this is the last slide I prepared. KISTI has been fostering open science through open access, open data, and open collaboration. We have developed different platforms to be used by domestic and international organizations. So we have collected data from home and abroad so that researchers can actually conduct joint research based on this ICT platform. So that's how we contributed to fostering open science in Korea and on a global scale. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Che. It was a very meaningful presentation. Our last speaker is Dr. Nusada Raham. She's a chair of Malaysian Open Science Alliance and a fellow of Malaysian Academy of Science. Noor, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it's your turn. Please welcome her in a loud applause.
Okay, as mentioned earlier, I'm a member of the Nation Open Science Platform. I also work with Enjong in the UNESCO Open Science Committee. And I'm here today to share with you the slide on open science, the landscape of open science and what is happening in terms of open science in Malaysia. So just a small landscape of open science in Malaysia. Currently, we have more than 90,000 researchers in both private and private institutions of higher learning, and maybe about 10,000 more in the research institute in Malaysia. And between 2001 to 2017, we published more than 200,000 articles and proceedings that are indexed by Scopus. All this data all over the places at the moment, which is why in the recent 4th National Science Policy for Science, Technology and Innovation, which was formulated for the country, there are about 4 agendas in the science policy that are directly related to open science. The strategy 16, there are 2 strategies there, and strategies 17, where actually we are talking about sharing of information and in terms of data and increasing the effectiveness in terms of outreach and science communication, which involves open science. So why are we interested to do this? Apart from it supporting the national STI agenda in Malaysia, we have the funding body in Malaysia have actually been funding a lot of research. The agency, particularly the Ministry of Higher Education and Ministry of Science and Technology, but at the moment, we don't have a collective data of, what work has been done and, information on a repository of work being done in Malaysia, in a repository in Malaysia. So we hope that with this open science, it will help to reinforce, and promote the quality and the integrity of the research work that we do in terms of reproducibility, transparency, and accountability of, the research that is being carried out and the output that is being reported. We would also like to democratize science in terms that for public funded research, especially because they are publicly funded and so they are accountable to the society. And we hope that this will help to increase, the return of public research investment. In addition, this would also help, science-informed policy making for the policymaker, as well as allows information for open innovation for our, industries. For research management, it's very important for us to be able to minimize the data, maximize the data utility, and also to minimize the cost of unnecessary duplication, of research, because if we have one source that actually gives us the data in terms of what research has been done and what output there is, we can actually minimize the cost by actually having better plan for research funding for new projects, for example. And of course, it would be good to have it for scientific progress. Everybody has been talking about COVID and how we can progress well with COVID, but one of the best example is the Human Genome Project, where it's actually finished early because of data sharing at that time. So these are, some of the reasons that we actually think that Malaysia should embark on open science for the research in Malaysia. And we did some search on the R3 data repository, and we see that, our neighbors in the ASEAN region, Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, all have repository, but there's none from Malaysia. So this is also another reason why we actually would like to have this, repository, at least a national repository for research data that, subsequently can be shared as necessary. And we also look at benchmarking, around the region. And as you notice, of course, Netherlands is way ahead of everybody else. But we try to look at Australia, which also have been doing very well in open science as well. Apart from not having a policy because they are in progress, they have everything else in place. So Malaysia, we are working on trying to get all this in place in terms of our formal policy, in terms of repository, skill and capacity, infrastructure, awareness, current funding, expertise, and also public engagement. So we have to try and see whether we can catch up with, the rest of the world on this. So with this, we actually submit a paper which was approved by the cabinet to have an agenda on open science, and actually form an open science platform committee that was actually tabled in and approved for in 2020. So Malaysia is actually very late in trying to actually implement open science. Korea has done it, as mentioned earlier, in 2015, and Japan and China, Australia have done it much earlier, and perhaps even Africa countries in the African continent and the Latin American has also done it much earlier. Malaysia is very slow in this. We started actually the initiative in 2019, and we managed to get the cabinet to approve this in 2020 in order for us to gather and consolidate Malaysia's research data, which we feel is a valuable national asset, in a proper platform that would enable accessibility and sharing of this data in accordance to the FAIR principle. what do we focus on? We focus on in the first phase. We are currently in the first phase of our initiative, the Malaysian Open Science Platform Initiative. It's a 2-year initiative. As I mentioned, we started in 2019 and we were supposed to finish in 2021 last year, but we have extended it, due to several reasons, and hopefully we'll end the first initiative in 2020 at the end of this year and start on a second initiative in 2023. So in the first phase, what we needed to focus on was to actually have a policy and a guideline, preferably a national policy and guideline for open science. And we need to build capacity and create awareness amongst scientists, researchers, and also, even the public, especially researchers who are very worried about, their data not being secure. Also institutions where we wanted, the institution to participate also are worried about their data is not being secure, or their data is free for all, for everybody's use. So we need to actually create the awareness and make people understand exactly what open science is about. And we also need to build the infrastructure. So we started off with some funding from the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. And we thought it is best to start with the 5 research universities within Malaysia. We have 5 research universities in Malaysia. And, these 5 research universities have been generating, data. So perhaps it's best to get and collect the data from these 5 research universities to actually show how open science can work to enable and to help open innovation, and also to be able to enable citizen science as we think of, as we actually put as one of the target that we wanted to actually achieve. So amongst the main target that we wanted to achieve is to have a landscape report on open science in Malaysia to be published. This is done, so we will have it published soon, and actually people can see where the landscape is on open science up to the year 2021. We hope to have a national guideline and policy for open science to be formulated. The guideline has been drafted. The policy brief has also been drafted, so we need to actually do this well and actually now bring it up to the agencies to get the guideline approved, and hopefully there will also be a national policy for open science. We needed to train people who will be able to manage the data for us, because we do not want people to just simply researchers to simply just put in the data without the data being curated properly, so as it can be useful and actually understandable, accessible, for example. So we wanted to train about 200 data stewards, quite ambitious here, and we wanted to reach at least 500,000 researchers, throughout the country, or scientists and other researchers as well as students, to be aware of open science at a very early stage, so that when they actually finally embark on proper research, they have this in mind already. And we needed to develop one platform, particularly to actually link the 5 research university for open science initiative. So I mentioned earlier that we have done the landscape study. So the main objective for the landscape study is to map out any existing open science activities and players in Malaysia, and to identify the factors enabling and hindering open science adoption in Malaysia, and to gauge the readiness level, as well as to undertake benchmarking exercise to identify global indicators to measure open science readiness. This is something that was very difficult for us, because we needed to measure. When we talk to researchers about open science, they all understood about what open access is, but they are not really clear about what open science is. So we had to look into this, and also we wanted to look at how globally people are other nations are looking at this in terms of policies that are available, so that you know, we will be able to actually understand, and also when we actually draft our policy, we'll be able to, you know, use some of the best practices by other, you know, nation in terms of their open science policy. So these are just some of the strategies that we actually did. We did survey, we did some workshop to gather some information, and amongst the key findings is that researchers have different level of open science practices, and they are not familiar actually with the FAIR principles in Malaysia. Researchers are very, very scared of their data being what they call stolen or used without their permission, or was still used in the wrong context. So they're not very familiar in terms of what the FAIR principle is, and also the, you know, what open science subscribe to the, you know, the principles of as open as possible and as close as necessary. So this has got to be, you know, imparted to the researchers. They perceive open science and sharing of data to be actually beneficial, because they actually are happy to share. It's just that they are not they are worried about whether open science would be, you know, something that is free for all, and it would be wrong. Their data would be wrongly used. Researchers are also not very familiar, in general, not very aware of any policies in the institution that they are working in related to open science. For example, the University of Malaya has an open science policy, but, you know, researchers are not really aware that there is an open science policy. Most researchers publish their work in open access journals anyway, so they're happy to have this request, you know, to share data, but they prefer to store their research data on personal storage, which is something that, you know, we find, you know, to be, you know, not very conducive, because, you know, the data gets lost, and once it's lost, it's very difficult for us to track, and, you know, we keep duplicating, you know, research projects because these data are lost, and, you know, other people cannot use it. So most researchers describe training for the data management. Most researchers still need training for data management plan so that they can actually do their proper data management of their research output. And they produce a wide spectrum of data across multiple disciplines, which actually also makes it very difficult for them to put in, you know, the research data into the repository in a manner where, you know, it can be accessible and findable, for example, and reusable. And mentioned earlier, they are very worried about their research being scooped, you know, or also most importantly being misinterpreted or misused by other party. So, you know, and the last one is, I can't see that. Oh, I can't see it here, but anyway, researchers also use, you know, other platform to share their research. For the institution, you know, there are 5 research universities which have got institutional repositories. They are separate, and most of them use the Dublin Core as their metadata standard. So it's easier for us to link now because they are using the same, you know, standard. But most institutional repository house structured data, and, you know, this establishment of the repository is actually quite new in most of the research universities as well. And institution managers and stakeholders emphasize the importance of a trusted repository to encourage data sharing. They are very, very worried about, you know, the security in this case, because they do not want their data to be leaked out and be misused. In terms of competency, the role of data steward and a data curator is actually very important in open science, because they have to provide support to the researchers, you know, in order to actually manage the data and actually look at the data life cycle. And most librarians in the research university are still performing traditional role as librarian, with very, very small number actually engaging in work as a data steward. So this needs to be upgraded. This needs to be, and their work has got to be enhanced. Hence, there's a big need for training for data stewardship to equip basically the librarians with the essential skills to support the open science initiatives. And we need a strong support from top management to drive the transformative role of the librarian as data stewards in the universities. So these are the recommendations that came out from the landscape study. There are about 9 recommendations all in all. One is that the first one that's very important is there should be a provision for a national open science policy in Malaysia. And with this, we also wanted to have a national guideline for implementation of open science, so that we at least have a proper standard for operating open science to enable interoperability at least, and also findability as well as reusability, for example, of the data. Now, we need to actually encourage funding agency, particularly in Malaysia. We have 2 major funding agencies to promote open science. Without which probably it will not work very well, unless the funding agency insists on researchers actually subscribing to open science. We need a trusted and interoperability research data sharing platform, which should be built, and it is currently being built. Hopefully it'll be done by October, and we'll see how this can be used to get the data from the 5 universities interconnected and interoperable. The most important thing also to us is how to sustain this operation, because we do not want to have to build a platform and to actually have all these data stewards and not be able to sustain this initiative, and it will just die off. This is one of the most difficult challenge that we are facing. And we also, like our Latin American friends just now, need to create incentive to allow researchers to actually participate in open science. The promotion system, for example, or other incentives that will enable researchers to actually be happy to participate in open science. We need to actually also train data stewards and to have a proper or effective communication about open science and its benefit. And we have to have more resources to actually put into research project and allow them to share the data in an open manner. So, so some of these are the recommendations for the for the ministry that we actually Ministry of Science actually that we actually put forward, which is to have a national policy for open science, and also to have an indicator for open science readiness, so that we'll be able to measure whether the country is ready or the researchers in the country are ready to develop for open science, as developed by RAN Europe and other partners in 2017, I think. We need to have sustainability. So this has to be, there has to be a strong support for this from the government and the ministry to be able to maintain and sustainable and sustain this initiative. And we also wanted the business model to be able to develop this and get our business partners and industries to also be involved in this, to use the data for open innovation, hopefully. We need to actually also train human capital in terms of data stewards, data curators, and also need to create awareness amongst the top management, not only in the universities, but also in the ministries, agencies, and research institute. And we need to actually position the government research institute, position this into the government research institute institutional framework to enable open science to actually move in Malaysia. So currently that's where we are. we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have drafted the guideline and have a policy brief. We have actually trained about 200 data stewards. We have actually trained about 20 trainers, and actually these trainers have gone out and trained, other trainers, other data stewards. So we have a total of about plus or minus 200, throughout the country. We have in each of the countries, in each of the institution universities now, several activities in trying to, showcase how open science can work. And we are in the middle of actually building a platform to link all the 5 research universities, which we hope will be able to launch this platform by the end of this year. So this is where we are at the moment. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks again. It was a very thoughtful and informative presentation. Since our time is almost over, I think our panel discussion will not be able to make today, but it was a very informative session. So we've learned a lot from Asia and Africa and Latin America. And actually, this kind of informative lessons learned from today will facilitate our actions on open science around the world from now on. You can actually check our today's session as well as the presentation material through Huba. And I once again would like to appreciate all the participants actually who are in present as well as online. We had more than 100 audience today, and actually would like to promise the next gathering and would like to finish today's session. Thank you.